Hello viewers, welcome to Ekam Academy. Today we are going to discuss about an interesting topic in terms of economy, that is, we are going to cover an international organization FATF. You know why it is in news? Because of number of reasons. In the past, if you have remembered, Pakistan was listed in the grey list of FATF. What is this grey list? What is a black list? What is the difference between these two? We'll look in the video, okay? Then you should also know about one critical term, that is virtual assets. So we have been hearing about crypto assets, no? So which are based on blockchain technology. Similarly, we have this virtual assets. So why these governments or even FATF, why they're giving some regulatory measures or why they're issuing some guidelines to regulate these virtual assets, and why they're becoming dangerous and why they're becoming a source for money laundering, okay? So in this context and this particular video, we are going to look into three aspects mainly. So we'll be looking what is FATF, what is its function and all those things. Then we'll be looking into what are virtual assets and what are the FATF guidelines, why FATF was in use in the recent times, okay, with respect to money laundering and how they wanted to regulate these virtual assets to prevent money laundering. So these will be the aspects which we will be covering in this video. So let's see this. So first we have to remember what are the points of discussion. So why it is in use, I'll explain. What are these virtual asset service providers, okay? So for if you have remembered, internet we are using every day, no? So in internet we have internet service providers, right? So the people who are providing us internet, those are considered as internet service providers. Same way, who are providing the virtual assets, okay? So those platforms will be considered as virtual asset service providers. Then we have FATF. Will understand what is its objectives and the types of lists, because always FATF is in news because of number of reasons. So in prelims perspective, you need to know, as it is an international body in GS paper 2, this is important. Then what are the key highlights of the study, recent study, and why they have expressed their concern, why there is no regulatory mechanism brought by different countries. With respect to that, we'll look into how they wanted to control this virtual assets to prevent money laundering, okay? So these will be the aspects of discussion today. And here you can see this forms part of GS paper 2 IR as part of FATF and all the related things. Then it also forms part of GS paper 3 in economy, especially under money laundering, okay? So which is an criminal activity, you can say. So why we are discussing is because FATF, which is an international body, it is interested to with respect to two things. One is money laundering as well as terrorist financing. So FATF has expressed its concern that no country is properly following the guidelines which it has issued in terms of regulating the virtual assets. Before that, we need to know what are virtual assets, okay? So you need to know what are these virtual asset service providers and virtual assets. So virtual assets means which are digital in nature, you know, you cannot touch them, you cannot physically feel them, okay? So virtually they will be there. And what are these assets and why, how they're based means based on blockchain technology. You know, we have cryptocurrencies, no? Same way, based on the blockchain technology, these cryptocurrencies are operating, which are one form of virtual assets, you can say. Cryptocurrencies or crypto assets like Bitcoin, you have number of things, no? Ethereum and all these things. So then how they are functioning. So if you see, one of the basic function of these virtual assets, why many of the people are preferring is, it makes the transactions cheaper, faster and easier. Okay, so if you transact using these virtual assets, these are the benefits you get normally. But what happened? What are the concerns? Most important concern is they're decentralized. Decentralized means what? There is no regulatory mechanism. For example, if you want to transact with your friend or your neighbor, okay, so that means in terms of monetary aspects, then how you have to do, when you're transacting from your account to his account or her account, then it is going through an intermediary who is the bank who is observing the transaction. There is some central regulatory mechanism in Indian financial system. But what happens when you're without regulation, if you're allowing these virtual assets, as they're decentralized in nature, those transactions will not be coming to the site of the government. So what happens? It is becoming a safe haven for the criminals as well as terrorists. It is becoming a safe haven. So that is why FATF has expressed its concern that virtual assets, including the cryptocurrencies or non-fungible tokens, anything, okay, which is based on blockchain technology, they need to be regulated, and it has already issued some guidelines. So with respect to those guidelines, why we are discussing now? Because recently FATF said no countries properly or 100% are not implementing these guidelines to regulate the virtual assets. In this regard, we are going to discuss discuss this aspect. Okay, so here first you need to know what are virtual assets. Already I told you virtual assets are nothing but digital assets which are operating based on blockchain technology, and because of their decentralized nature, they will be out of the oversight of any central bank or even the banking system. Because of this reason only, if you have seen, even government of India was also reluctant to accept cryptocurrencies within Indian economy. After Supreme Court has issued some guidelines, they started regulating the cryptocurrencies. Okay, in that aspect you need to connect these things. But what happened here, virtual assets or crypto assets which will be digital representation of any value. Okay, so which is digitally traded, it can be exchanged or transferred for payment purposes. Okay, so for example, digital currency, you know, to replace this cryptocurrencies only, RBI has proposed to central bank digital currency. If you have remembered, that is we call e-rupee, digital rupee we call, central bank digital currency as an alternative. Okay, so that our people will not fall into the trap of cryptocurrencies. Then what happens, what are these service providers? These are nothing but they're defined by FATF, because some regulatory mechanism should be there. Otherwise what happens, easily they will fall into the trap and they may lose. You know, it is very like normally all the cryptocurrencies are subjected to high speculation, so you don't know when it will rise and when it will fall down, so it is always subjected to high speculation. So the people who are trading in these things, they have to be very cautious. That is why there are some regulatory mechanisms in place to control these service providers as well as the crypto assets. Okay, so what are these FATF issued guidelines means? You can see they have issued in terms of the following aspects. Here, exchange between virtual asset and a fiat currency. Here, what is a fiat currency we are referring to? Fiat currency is nothing but a currency which is normally it is not backed by any physical thing like gold or anything, but it is rather issued by the government as a legal tender. For example, Indian rupee is a fiat currency. Okay, it is not backed by any physical commodity like gold, silver or something, but it is issued by the government as a legal tender. Then we call such as fiat currencies. Okay, then exchange between one or more forms of virtual assets. We have different assets, like I told you. One is cryptocurrency, we can say Bitcoin, and another we have is non-fungible token, NFTs. We know, no? What are these non-fungible tokens? Non-fungible tokens are those, these are again based on blockchain technology, digital assets only, but what happens is they cannot be they cannot be replicated. Replicated means normally they will be taking the form of different things, like whatever we observe as part of our daily lives, like photography it can be, or artwork or anything. Okay, song or video, any form they can take. Okay, but they cannot be replicated. That means you cannot replicate the same form of NFT. That is why they're called non-fungible tokens. Okay, so if you're exchanging between two different types of cryptocurrencies, then also there should be some regulatory mechanism that was issued by FATF, that has to be followed. In transfer of virtual assets from one to another account, if there is transfer, or safekeeping and administration of virtual assets or instruments to control these virtual assets, and also participating in the provisions of financial services related to the sale of virtual assets. So in these aspects they have issued some guidelines, okay, for all the governments who are members to FATF to regulate, how to regulate these virtual currencies and how to safeguard the people, okay, from these transactions in this context. Okay, so this definition of virtual assets or the service providers include many persons who are involved in crypto businesses, like you can say exchange people, okay, who are facilitating these exchanges, who are ATM operators, who are wallet custodians. You have these wallets, no, prepaid wallets and postpaid wallets we have. So, and also we have hedge funds. What are these hedge funds? These are nothing but pooled investments, like mutual funds we have. Okay, investments like pooled investments, like mutual funds, exchange traded funds we have, no, like these things which are called hedged funds. Okay, so pooled investments we can say. So then what is the role of FATF? We have to know what is FATF, right? So FATF is an organization which was formed in 1989 at G7 summit. So what are all G7 countries? You know, G7 is a grouping of all developed countries or economically developed or industrialized countries they have formed. Okay, so what is this G7 grouping? Which countries are part of this? Means US, you have Mexico, UK, Italy, then France, Germany and Japan. Okay, so these are the countries which are part of G7 along with European Union, and you know previously Russia was also part of it, and then we used to call it as G8. But after Crimean annexation of Russia by Russia in 2014, this Russia was expelled from G8 and then it became G7. Okay, so this is what you have to remember. At the G7 summit which happened in 1989, this FATF was established. Okay, so first most important thing you need to know. Then what is the role of FATF, in what aspects it is functioning means it is working with respect to two things. At the time of establishment, it was entrusted with two responsibilities. One is prevention of money laundering, at the same time of prevention of terrorist financing. So what are these two things? Here money laundering means what? Laundering means what? You will make your dirty clothes washed or clean, right? Same way, money laundering is a financial mechanism where the black money will be converted easily into white money. So the black money means which is not legal, that was converted into legal form. That is a simple aspect of money laundering. So this is dangerous for the economy because black money is rerouting into the Indian economy or any economy as the clean money. So again, you are making use of it. So this money laundering is always like an economic offense, you know. Under this we have a law in India called Prevention of Money Laundering Act of 2002, under which this Act we have Enforcement Directorate which will be looking into these aspects. And if you have seen, many arrests have been in the recent times, no, with respect to Delhi excise scam, or even Arvind Kejriwal also, he was arrested on this same act. Okay, so here you need to remember PMLA and the role of ED also. Then what is this terrorist financing means? Whatever the proceeds of the money with respect to black money, all these things, if they're going through the terrorist persons, okay, so to fuel the crime or terrorist activities, if they're using this money, then it is called as terrorist financing. Okay, so these two aspects are regulated mainly by FATF. But subsequently what happened, not only with respect to these two things, it has expanded its scope to even with respect to weapons of mass destruction. So weapons of mass destruction can be nuclear weapons, chemical weapons, biological weapons. So in case if any financial mechanism is established by terrorists or any other persons to develop these weapons of mass destruction, at that time FATF will be monitoring these also. So it is also having since 2012 this weapons of mass destruction also under its ambit. Apart from this, the fourth important aspect under FATF is virtual assets. That is what we have discussed, no? So this is also, so that means with respect to money laundering, terrorist financing, weapons of mass destruction, as well as virtual assets, with respect to these four things, FATF is the regulatory body at the international level. So this is a clear thing, okay, right? So then, is India a member of this FATF means? Yes. So we have joined as a 36th member in 2010. So since 2006 onwards, we are an observer country. Then in the present day, we have 39 member countries as part of FATF. This is what you have to keep in mind, as I told you here, including European Commission as well as Gulf Cooperation Council. So Gulf Cooperation Council, you know, this is a regional organization of 6 Arab countries. Okay, so what are these 6 countries? If you know, answer in the comment section. Okay, so here you have to remember that there is no specific headquarters for FATF, but it is based in the same OECD headquarters, which is based in Paris of France. Okay, so these are the things which you have to keep in mind. And India is observer since 2006, and 2010 we are having full membership as a FATF member. So what are the roles normally? As I told you, money laundering, terrorist financing was added in 2001. Initially, it was only money laundering. Later on, to counter the finance with respect to weapons of mass destruction. This was done in 2012. Then we have virtual currencies also got added in the recent times, because always, if you have remembered, when we are seeing these aspects which are growing every day, we can easily say one thing, right? Technology is a double-edged sword. So the way how you use it, okay, it will be the benefit also, or the harm you have also will be the same way. So it is always a double-edged sword. So as we progress, we are having different ways to find these different things, okay, or to fuel these type of things. So then what happens in FATF? You will be hearing about normally 2 lists. Okay, so what are those 2 lists we hear? That is grey list as well as blacklist. So what is this grey list and blacklist means? If you see, grey list is nothing but like a warning to the countries which are considered as safe haven for terrorist financing. For example, Pakistan, it used to be under grey list of FATF almost 4 years back. So that means in case if Pakistan is trying to use its territory, or it is supporting any of the terrorist groups as a safe haven, then it will be placed under FATF grey list, and it will be used as a warning that in case if you are not stopping this, then we'll be placing you under blacklist. So what happens if when your country is placed under blacklist, why Pakistan should stop these things means, in case if any country is under blacklist of FATF, then what happens? Economic sanctions will be placed over that country. Economic sanctions means there will be restrictions on trade and all, and no financial institutions like IMF or World Bank, they will not give loans, or loan process will be difficult for these countries as there will be regulatory mechanisms. That means funding will be there, will not be there, investment opportunities will not be there, FDIs, FIIs will not flow into that country, trade will be stopped, like this, everything when it is blocked, okay? So the economy will be crippled. That is the main objective why we are maintaining this blacklist under FATF, crippling of the economy. So when economy is not there, how you can sponsor to these terrorist groups? In that way, we are trying to bring them into one order. So that is the main objective here. Then you have to understand what are the countries under grey list, okay? So many countries, after now Pakistan was removed after the grey list, because what happened is Pakistan has shown that it has taken some measures to control this terrorist financing. In that regard, 2 years back itself, Pakistan was removed from the grey list. That it has shown that we are trying to remove the terrorist safe havens what we have on the territory. We are consolidating and we are trying to enforce these mechanisms, like that they have shown some mechanism. So that is why now FATF has removed Pakistan from the grey list. Then what are the countries under the grey list means, you have number of countries like South Sudan, Philippines, Syria is one country we have, like this, so many countries are part of grey list. Then what are the countries on the blacklist of FATF means, only 2 countries which are considered as non-cooperative, like Iran and North Korea. We call Democratic People's Republic of Korea, DPRK we call, right? That is North Korea. So these 2 countries, Iran and North Korea, only are the countries which are on the FATF blacklist. So this is all what we have discussed. Then here you can see these are the consequences of being a grey list. I already told you what happens and all. So then what are the key highlights? If you have remembered, almost you can say like 7-8 months before or 10 months before, India also has issued guidelines with respect to these virtual assets, okay? Because previously these guidelines used to be applied only for banks and other regulatory mechanisms which we have in terms of real estate or some securities and market and all these things. But now as virtual assets and their presence is increasing, India has already issued guidelines how to control these virtual assets. But what happened, these virtual assets, again, the implementation part is still at the nascent stage itself. We are not properly implementing. That is why FATF said some countries have already prohibited the virtual assets and their in their particular aspects within the country. India is also doing somewhat better, but there is a lot of things which has to be improved. In this context, we need to know what are the key highlights of this report which was suggested by the FATF in terms of reforms, you can say. So FATF is saying many countries are not fully implementing what are required to control these virtual asset service providers. Second thing, it said that India has already conducted a series of risk assessment survey. Okay, that means what will be the risk that we pose from the virtual assets and all. That survey was conducted by India. But what happened is FATF has to evaluate. Okay, that means whether those measures will be sufficient or not with respect to money laundering and how to prevent these virtual assets to engage into money laundering, because of their decentralized nature, it is easy for the terrorist people or the criminal people to get the money in the form of money laundering through virtual assets, because there is no regulatory oversight. That is why there is a need for regulatory oversight, and India already conducted some risk assessment survey which has to be reviewed by FATF. So this is one major thing. In some countries like China, Egypt and Saudi Arabia, so they already have prohibited the use of virtual assets in their country and economy. In some countries like Seychelles and Indonesia, they're already in the way of prohibition. So if you see, these virtual assets, they are inherently international as well as borderless because of decentralized nature. For example, whatever the transactions that happen within Indian territory and Indian financial system, that will be coming to the regulatory bodies like we have in terms of banking for RBI, like SEBI for security market. Like this, we have regulatory bodies for every particular domain. But in case if they are decentralized in nature, then who are going to like oversight, or who are going to overview them, or who are going to control or regulate them? So that is why, because of their borderless unorganized nature, it is becoming a safe haven for the terrorists to get money from the virtual assets. That is why there is a very much important need, urgent need for regulating these assets. Then you can see FATF added the terrorist groups also, including some, like you can see this is in Islamic State in Libya, we have Al-Qaeda, like other affiliates out there. So these are all added and they're under the watch list of FATF. So whether they're getting the money from these aspects or not. So this is entirely with respect to virtual assets and how the FATF has issued some guidelines, and also with respect to money laundering. Now, what is the practice question given for prelims yesterday's elephant pass, sometimes seen in news. Already, as I told you, UPSC have asked a question and this is related to Sri Lanka. This is the answer. Then what is the practice question for today? With reference to FATF grey list, consider the following statements. These are the countries that have in the assessment of FATF failed to prevent international money laundering and terrorist financing. At present, Pakistan has been remained on the FATF grey list for the 5th consecutive year. So answer among the options which is correct and choose the correct one in the comment section and let me know. Then what is the mains question? Explain the regulatory challenges posed by virtual asset service providers in combating money laundering and terrorist financing. Here you have to define what are virtual assets, and then you have to go for virtual asset service providers who are there and how they're becoming challengeable. Okay, so how they're becoming a challenge in terms of money laundering and terrorist financing, and you have to mention the role of Indian government and also FATF, how it has issued some guidelines and how it is trying to control this situation. So these aspects have to be discovered, has to be concluded in this answer. Then, as I have reached to the end of the video, today we have discussed about what is the role of FATF in controlling and regulating virtual assets to prevent money laundering and to prevent safe haven for the terrorist financing. So these are the aspects which we have discussed, along with the composition of FATF, membership, objectives, blacklist and grey list. So this is all. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.